All right, well, here he is. I think it's week 14. It's usually this time of the semester, things get a little fuzzy. Just there's so much work to try to get done. But it's amazing. We only have like 2 more weeks left of this semester, and then we're going to be done for spring semester 25. How crazy this has been to go through this, to do, it's been a year of school because I started in May of last year. And so it's been a full 12 months of going to college, which has been pretty amazing to do. I've done like 18 credit hours in the last 12 months, and it's been fun. Learned a lot of good stuff. Looking forward to continuing my education. So let's talk about this week. Boy, do we have some fun stuff to talk about this week with the sons of Jacob in the Old Testament. Before I get into that story, which so many wild things to talk about over there. Holy cow, this is a crazy part of the book of Genesis, is the 12 sons of Jacob. I want to talk a little bit about my historical research class. There's some fun stuff I'm learning in that class about World War I and food, which has been really just fascinating to look at. When doing historical research, it is good to take good notes. So if you're ever doing like a research project, something you want to study, pick a topic and get in and study it. Read all you can about it. Take notes about it. What are the books that you're reading? We did like last week an annotated bibliography. And what that is where you take your sources, all the books and websites and things that you're looking at, and you write a paragraph about each of them. What is it telling me, and what are questions I'm learning from it? What are questions that it's making me think about? So this exercise just helps you to start organizing your thoughts around the sources that you're looking at. So whether those are primary sources or secondary sources, we've talked about those several weeks ago, it just helps you to pull those thoughts together. So this week, one of the exercises that we did was putting together our topic sentences. So this is kind of like an outline, if you will, of your research paper. So we have our title sentence. What's the title of the paper? And then what this exercise does is makes us write one sentence for each of the major things that we want to cover in the paper. And so what happens with this is in a way an outline, because all we have to do is go back and take these sentences and flesh them out into 1 to 2 paragraphs, basically. And that starts to really that'll create a rough draft for our paper, and then we can refine it and adjust it and tweak it to make our final paper after that. So if you want to do historical research, that's what you do. Pick a topic, pick something you're interested in, study a bunch of books and a bunch of things about it, look it up for like libraries, and there's archives online you can look up and things for historical things, and then take good notes. Write down like, here's the book, here's what I'm learning from this book, here's the questions that I'm now asking because of what I read in this book. So this just helps pull your thoughts out of your brain, puts them onto paper, and allows you to start to think through what it is you're studying, what are you learning about it, what questions does it lead you to ask now, and how do I find more resources on those? Which rabbit holes do I want to pursue, which ones do I not? And to start digging into that topic to help you in creating that research. So pick something and try this. It's actually quite fun, honestly. And you might be thinking, writing a historical research paper, that doesn't sound like any fun. It actually is. Pick something, pick a topic, pick something from history you want to study. I'll tell you, the Snopes monkey trial is a fascinating one to get into. There's so much that you can learn, even in World War I. So what I'm learning, my paper is I'm writing a paper on World War I. I started with more of consumerism in World War I, and it's kind of narrowed down to food and World War I. How was our consumption of food affected? And so fascinating how this has worked out, actually. Not only did grocery stores start during World War I, but actually nutritional science began during World War I. So as they were starting to look at how do we help people with their nutritional needs while the war is happening, because most people were eating a lot of bread, a lot of potatoes, and a lot of meat, like steaks, hamburgers, those kinds of things. And they realized that at the rate of consumption that the average American was doing, that this ran into a big problem during the World War I, because not only did U.S. have to feed their troops, which their troops were on a diet consuming around 4,000 calories a day to sustain their energy needs while fighting a war. But they also had to help Europe with their food needs because that was important for the Allies. I mean, England's getting bombed by Germany. France is pretty much destroyed. So a lot of their production, a lot of their fields were bombed out. A lot of production is gone. Not to mention most of the men in those countries who would have been around to do the farming are fighting the war. So they're not around. So more women had to do the farming work over there. Which was, it's hard work. Farming is hard work, and I'm not saying women can't do it, but I think there is a distinct advantage men have when men have a tendency to build muscle faster, and so they get stronger and can do. It's a little easier for men to do that hard labor work. But it was a challenging time, so Europe was relying on America to make more food to even help Europe to have food so they weren't starving to death as well during the war. And so that meant huge conservation here in America as people were trying to conserve. So the Food Administration, we talked about, I think last week with Herbert Hoover, he really put out the idea that we need to voluntarily be willing to self-sacrifice for the greater good. This became what it meant to be an American. Is self-sacrifice was truly what it meant to be an American. So self-asceticism, if you will. So they wanted people to cut down. So cut 1 meal a day out. So only 2 meals maximum, maybe one at best, but it may, sometimes 2 meals maximum. Meatless Mondays, wheatless Wednesdays. So cut down, only, cut out all meat like 1 day a week, and we'll take all that extra meat and ship it to Europe. Or wheat 1 or 2 days a week, and we'll ship all that to Europe. Then they started to say, well, let's get into other foods. Let's encourage you to eat vegetables. Let's like collard greens and spinach and lots of other things that are out there. So bananas actually were being imported from South America as another food that Americans could eat. We hadn't had bananas as a regular type of food to buy until around World War I. So that's when bananas got really introduced as a common type of food to buy. So they started encouraging people to eat different things, try different meats. In fact, it got to the point where actually they were starting to encourage you to say, hey, let's use up the stray dogs and cats and animals and turn them into meat. In Europe, they were eating horses because, of course, they didn't have, the cows were diminishing rapidly because of the demands of meat and things. And so they were eating horses. They were eating whatever animal they could find because they needed the calories, they needed the sustenance. So as this was happening, as rationing was going on, two things were happening. One is the nutritional science started to emerge. Fad diet started to come out. Vegetarianism came out as actually started to gain some prominence at this time. So because it meant no meat, so that saved meat for the troops, and relying on other things. Cornbread, which was a Southern staple, went from being the food of slaves or the food of poor people to a regular thing. So eating corn-based products, eating more like diversity of different kinds of potatoes, potato flour instead of wheat flour, other things like that started to come in. Different kinds of grains started to come into the diet. So they were trying to diversify where could you get your calories and do things. So really fascinating how the impact on our day and age, it's fascinating. I think we take grocery stores and being able to buy food and nutritional science for granted these days, but a lot of it really comes from these originations in World War I. And so isn't that could be something you get in and study more of. It's really fascinating what is there and what you can learn from it. So in fact, one of the books I've been reading for it is this book, Modern Food. Let's see, I don't know if I can get that to show up right. Modern Food, Moral Food. Really fascinating book about what happened with the foods and things. And so it's pretty wild, some of the things that happened back then. It became important, like being fat meant you were gluttonous and meant that you were un-American. And so people were like tattling on their neighbors to the government. They would write down the names and addresses of all their neighbors who were eating too much food and then send it to the government so the government could punish them. It kind of became a bit of a crazy time of turning in your neighbors for the betterment of helping people to conserve food. So it was really interesting how it kind of turned into a bad situation, unfortunately, for some parts of America. But again, foods that people thought were just poor people foods became normal foods to eat as they looked at encouraging diversifying nutrition, and they used nutritional science to justify, oh, these foods have vitamins, eat them, they'll help you, they're good for you. So they're trying to encourage people to get off of just the main meat and potatoes type idea and do more of a diversification of food. So some fascinating stuff. Hopefully that kind of sparks your interest, or look at any of my past videos for other things to go, oh, that's kind of cool. And then go find a bunch of books at the library and look online in archives and things and pull stuff together. Historical research is actually quite fun. There's the main subject you're going to learn, and then there's a lot of ancillary stuff that you'll pick up as you go along, which is really, really interesting. So let's jump into my textual analysis class, 4990, as we talked about the sons of Jacob. So why was Joseph? Joseph was son 11 from Jacob, but he's the one that got the birthright from Jacob as far as the priesthood and authority and continuation, and he kind of became the main, after Jacob died, Joseph kind of became the main patriarch. And we all are probably familiar with the story of Joseph, that he was son 11, so he had a lot of older brothers and sisters, and his older brothers didn't like him. He was the favored one because he was the first son of Rachel, which was Jacob's original wife, the wife he wanted to have first, which is interesting because if Laban, his father-in-law, had not tricked him by making him marry on his wedding night, he ended up consummating the marriage with Rachel's older sister, Leah. If that hadn't happened and Rachel had been the actual older sister, Joseph, would have been the oldest son. But he was son number 11 because of infertility and other things that were happening with a lot of these women. So again, Jacob's polygamy was not him going, I need a bunch of wives, I need to go ahead and do this. He got into polygamy because his father-in-law tricked him. So he worked for 7 years, wanted to marry Rachel on his wedding night. So they had the whole wedding party, everything. It was great. It was fun. He and Rachel are hanging out together. On the wedding night, it's Leah that Jacob consummates the marriage with, not Rachel. His father-in-law pulled the switcheroo at the last minute. And like we talked about last week, I don't know if Leah was in on it or Rachel was in on it, how much prior warning they had about what was going on. But Jacob wakes up the next day, realizes the woman he just slept with was not the woman he spent the day with yesterday at the wedding parties. And now he's married to a different woman. And so he complains to his father-in-law. His father-in-law says, okay, I'll give you a couple months, finish everything out with marrying Leah, so you can get your marriage off to the right track there, and then you can marry Rachel, but you have to work for 7 more years too. So then he has to go through that whole process again. So it's Rachel was the second wife, but then she had infertility for a while. So Leah had a couple of kids. Then Rachel's like, take my handmaid so she can have kids for me, kind of like the Abraham and Sarah story with Hagar. And then she has kids. And so Leah's like, well, take my handmaid too, so she can have more kids with my handmaid. They have handmaids, and eventually, after he's had several children with 3 women, Rachel finally gets pregnant, and that's Joseph. And then Benjamin as well, it's child 12. So it's a mess, crazy mess. Again, it's not polygamy that Jacob wanted to do, but it was other people saying, you're gonna get into this, you're gonna do this. It was tricked on him at first, and then it was used as a opportunity to overcome infertility for these women that he wanted to, for Rachel, and then Leah joined in on it as well when Leah stopped having kids. She later had another child or 2 afterwards, so it was kind of strange how it all worked out. But that meant, in the literal sense, Joseph is not the oldest. He's number 11. So there's 10 sons ahead of him that should have had the right to gain that line of authority, that birthright, before Joseph did. But as we learn at this time that we're going through the stories of Joseph, We also get the stories of his older brothers and why they were not worthy to continue on with that birthright as well. That the promises that God had given Abraham and down through Isaac and into Jacob and then and so forth. Um, all those stories weave together here. So Joseph, of course, he's given that coat, the tunic that's we call it the coat of many colors is the most common way that it's referred to. It was a tunic that had a lot of different a lot of people think it had vertical stripes in it. It's like different types of material pulled together. Some even claim it had possibilities of robes of the priesthood, rights of authority that came with it as well, like the birthright that Jacob got from Esau, and so on and so forth. The garments of Noah. Some people say that it was passed down, and Joseph got them as a young kid, and all of his older brothers were jealous of him, and Joseph was having these dreams of his older brothers that were symbolic of his older brothers worshiping him. And he's really excited about him, and he's telling his brothers about him. His brothers resent him for it. So they decide, you know what, let's kill him. Let's get him out of here. And Reuben, there's two stories here. Reuben stops him, and Judah stops him in different tellings of this. Reuben stops and says, no, let's just throw him in this pit and let him die. The wild animals will come get him. And they're like, okay, fine, we'll throw him in the pit and leave. Reuben comes back to find him, only to find out he's gone because there was a merchants that came by that picked him up and sold him into slavery. The Judah story is Judah said, no, guys, that would profit us nothing to kill him. Why don't we sell him and make money off of him? And they're like, oh, it sounds good. And then their distant cousins of the Ishmaelites come by and they buy him. They sell their brother off, basically, make some money, some profit for themselves to enjoy. Joseph goes into slavery, gets taken to Egypt, and then gets sold to the house of Potiphar and becomes a slave in his household down in Egypt. And that's the story of Joseph. Now we know Joseph goes on to Potiphar's wife tries to seduce Joseph. Joseph resists those attempts and flees. And so she turns her story around basically and says, Joseph's trying to rape me and abuse me. And so Potiphar's like, how dare you, Joseph? I trusted you. Throw him in jail. So Joseph gets tossed in jail. And so he was rising up the ranks in Potiphar's house, and now he's back in jail. While in jail, he meets the baker and the kind of an assistant to Pharaoh, basically, and like a butler to Pharaoh. So he meets them in jail, interprets their dreams. They get out of jail. The baker dies. The butler goes back to Pharaoh's court, and then Pharaoh has a dream and says, oh yeah, that's right, I forgot to tell you, there's this guy that can interpret dreams that's in jail. He can help you. And then that's when Joseph gets taken to Pharaoh. He interprets Pharaoh's dream, even though Pharaoh wouldn't tell anybody what his dream was. And then he gets appointed into Pharaoh's court and rises up to where he is literally second in line to Pharaoh in Egypt. And then, of course, the famines and the droughts and things actually happen as Pharaoh's dream said. And but because of what Joseph has done, Pharaoh is sitting on a huge amount of grain. And so everybody has to come to him to buy the grain, which makes Egypt extremely wealthy. Thus, when Jacob and his family run into Joseph again. So that's the Joseph line. What happens to the rest of these brothers? Well, one, they tried to kill their brother, for one thing. We don't hear many of the stories of these brothers, but there's a few we hear. Simeon and Levi have a sister that is their sister, like same mother. They're all from the same mother, Dinah. Dinah, when Jacob moves his family to the land of the Adulamites, I think is what it is. Anyways, it's this land. There's already tribes living out there. They come to live next to these tribes. The tribal chief's son says, hey, she's hot. Dinah goes out to hang out, try to mingle and hang out with some of the other women in the area. This guy says she's hot and she's a foreigner, which means she's fair game. So the challenge in that society was, again, women were seen as property. So the law was that if you violate a man's property, aka violate a woman, you have to pay the man a fine because you ruined his property, basically, which sounds really archaic, and is, honestly. So the laws were more about protecting men's interests, men's assets, than protecting the women in some of these situations. Um, so he decides, and the problem is this: a way to exert authority over somebody is to have sex with them, to be on top. It was a sin in the ancient world for a man to be on the bottom. And we've talked about that in previous videos as well. So sexual sin was a man being on the bottom, basically. So if a man is on top, that's usually like after wars and things, they would sexually abuse the people that lost the war to again show a sign of victory over them. I am now your master type idea. So a man sleeping with male and female slaves was a normal thing back then, because that was their way of exerting authority over them, or justifying, proving I am your master. I am giving, you're receiving type idea. So this guy decides, I want Dinah as a wife. And so he basically kidnaps her and rapes her. So what the challenge is, I mean, and which sounds absolutely despicable in any stretch of the imagination, but what the thing that's interesting about this story is now Dinah is used goods, or would be considered that at this time, and so she needs to be married. It was an obligation. If you violated a woman, you should marry her, because you've kind of ruined her. So for other men at least, and so by raping her, it basically forced Jacob to marry Dinah to him. So in a way, he used rape to, rather than go, hey, Jacob, I'm in love with your daughter. Can I pay you for her and she become my wife? And then instead of doing it legitimately, he forces the issue by raping her. So he used rape as a way to make sure that she can be his wife, because now they have to get married, kind of an idea. So anyways, so Jacob and his sons come to negotiate with I think it was Shechem and his dad, trying to discuss what is the bride price, how do we reconcile these issues. And Jacob doesn't want to have much to do with this, and so it's his sons that go do the negotiations. And the sons are like, okay, fine, but you have to join our religion in order. We can't marry our women off to you for different religions, because our religion is important to us. So you need to join our religion. And Shechem's like, okay, what do I got to do to join your religion? And they said, well, you need to be circumcised. All the men of the town need to be circumcised. And he says, okay, great. And he actually just goes out and does it himself on his own self, basically. And then he tells everybody else, you need to do it too. They all get circumcised to join in this. I mean, Shechem's going to great lengths to get Dinah, basically. He's really enamored with her. But he didn't realize that Levi and Simeon, the brothers of Dinah, had an ulterior motive. After all these men had circumcised themselves, meaning they, the foreskin of their penis is cut off, they're all in a lot of pain. They're in the recovery mode and very sore, lots of pain. They are in a vulnerable position. So what does Levi and Simeon do? They walk into the town and slaughter all the men. They just walk around and kill all the men, because the men can't fight themselves. Can't fight. They're in too much pain. So they kill them all. And then they take women and children from these people for themselves, and probably sell a lot in slavery or other things too. Start taking all their assets and things over, which is, I mean, it's a bad situation. Levi and Simeon really messed up. So they messed up. Reuben, who was the oldest, he ends up in a predicament where he sleeps with Bilhah, which was one of the wives of his father Jacob. Bilhah was one of the second wives, the maidservants that became his wife. And I think she was Rachel's maidservant. I think Bilhah was Rachel's maidservant, which meant she would have been the third wife of Jacob, if I remember correctly. Because I think Reuben was from Leah. He was the oldest, so he was the firstborn from Leah. And I could, anyways, I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. That's okay. But anyways, he sleeps with his one of his stepmom, basically, because he's got four moms, one genetic mom and three stepmoms, basically. And it's interesting. So I had to do a small report, an exegesis report on the Testament of Reuben, which is there's a apocryphal writing out there called the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs. Um, it's written probably 2nd century BC, so around like 200 BC, 300 BC, that kind of a time frame. So during the time of the Maccabees and so forth, that's as far as they can get it back. Not much. They think it was around during the time of the Dead Sea Scrolls, because they found fragments of this testament with some of the Dead Sea Scroll caves in Qumran. So in his testament, Reuben talks about how he basically just lusted after his stepmom and decides one night to sneak into her tent and do the thing while she was passed out from being drunk. And so it just turned bad. In fact, the testament is his admonition of don't get into immorality because it ruins your life. Like I ruined mine. Don't do what I did, kind of thing. So he ruined his life that way. And of course, Judah. Now we get to him. Judah, interestingly enough, still gets the opportunity. He gets a blessing, and a lot of the scriptures attribute that to how he tried to save Joseph and Benjamin's life from Joseph, basically he tried to help Joseph by not killing him, but selling him into slavery. He tried to save Benjamin's life and things later on when Joseph is messing with him with the stolen goblets and things. So Judah gets the blessing where Christ will eventually come through his lineage. So they're a blessed tribe. Levi, of course, gets the priesthood. The Levites go through him as well. But Judah, let's talk about him for a little bit. We spent some time on this week. So Judah introduces us to the concept of levirate marriage. Levirate marriage is a situation where, and this happened in Judah, so Judah gets married, has kids. He needs to get a wife for his oldest son. He gets a wife for his oldest son, and his oldest son is wicked according to the scriptures, and God kills him. How and why, we don't know. He just dies. So now he has a wife who's a widow with no children. This is a very bad situation for women to be in because they've had a husband. So they're technically a virgin, but they're not, they've had a husband. But she has no children either, which she could then live off of her children for support if she had an older son. But she doesn't have any kids. So in levirate marriage, what happens is she becomes the wife of the next son. So the next son is Onan, and he takes Tamar for this wife. So Tamar used to be his sister-in-law. Now Tamar is his wife because his older brother died. So here's the thing. Onan and Tamar are supposed to have children. The first son they have is in tribute to his older brother. So his older brother is supposed to so that son becomes the inheritor of the older brother's assets and inheritance. So the birthrights and things go through him to continue that down. Onan decides, I don't want to have anything to do with that. I don't want to have kids for my brother. And so he enjoys being married to Tamar, meaning they sleep together, but Onan does not let her get pregnant. In fact, the scriptures actually say, it's a crazy phrase, but it actually says that Onan spat it out on the ground. So he would get to the point of climax and then pull out and to finish off, not inside Tamar, so she can't get pregnant, basically. So enjoying the benefits of being married, but not fulfilling his obligations, which meant, of course, Tamar is childless as well. Having a son was a great source of opportunity for a woman. Being a childbearer was a key aspect of a woman's life. And so getting married elevated her status. Bearing an older son, a son that could be the inheritor, elevated her status as well. So Onan is denying Tamar her status. Basically, he's holding her down, but using her for his personal gain. So while it's not rape, because they're married, he's not really doing it for the right reasons either. So Onan gets killed by God. So now we go down to the final son of Judah. He had 3 sons. So now the first 2 are dead. he's got this third son. So Tamar would then, by the levirate marriage, become the wife of the third son. Well, the problem is the third son was not old enough to get married yet. He hadn't quite gotten to the puberty years type thing, and so he was still too young. So he would be in elementary school in our day and age today, basically. So he's young, and Tamar's probably in her 20s by this point. So Judah, who is the leader of the family, who basically has the legal rights for Tamar, he tells Tamar, okay, I want you to go live with your dad, go back to your dad's home to live, and then when Selah, my youngest, is old enough, I'll come get you, and then you can marry him and have kids, and to the other two sons, and then, do your thing. So that's what Judah does. Now, Judah could have said, stay in our household and just wait, but he didn't. He sent her away. That means he doesn't have to feed her, doesn't have to take care of her, doesn't have to worry about her. Well, so Tamar goes back to her dad. That means Tamar is living in her dad's house, is helping with the dad's work on the farm and taking care of their animals and things. But she can't get married. She's a widow. So she has to wear, there's certain clothing that would say she is in mourning of her husbands at this point. So she's off the market. Her dad can't have her go to anybody else. And she has no kids. So she's literally just a woman in limbo, basically. Her fate is controlled by her father-in-law, Judah, because she's waiting until his youngest son, who's probably more than 10 years younger than she is, gets old enough where he can get married. Then they'll get married because of the levirate marriage law, and any kids they have will be dedicated to the first two sons first and then to them later. So it's a bad situation, very bad situation. And I hope as you've listened to this and gone through this, you really feel for Tamar. She's in a bad spot. Her father can't help her because he has no legal rights to her anymore. Her father-in-law doesn't want to do anything with her. But because he's the one that has the legal rights to her, she's stuck, okay? So here's the problem. They live close enough that she knows and observes Judah and his family growing up. She knows, even the scriptures it mentions, that she knows that Selah gets to the age where he can get married. And Judah's not calling for Tamar. So she realizes, I'm totally screwed. My father-in-law is basically leaving me a childless widow, which means I'm going to die with no honor, with no respect, with no opportunities to further myself as a woman. And so this is a bad situation. She's got the status quo is not a good thing for her. So one day she hears that her father-in-law happens to be in the area. So her father-in-law recently lost his wife. Judah's wife passed away. He did the mourning rituals and things for that. He's on his way to a shearing party. So when the sheep were sheared, they'd usually do this big celebration. The shepherds would bring people out, have a party. It kind of became a thing. I mean, you got to admit, when your whole life is watching sheep eat and keeping wolves away and gardening and stuff, you got to have a lot of parties in there to break up the monotony of this kind of a life. So they didn't have Netflix, they didn't have Disneyland or other stuff they could do. So you just had parties, just threw parties. So they had a sheep shearing party. Everybody comes out, all the people, the servants come out, they shear the sheep, and they throw a big party about it, celebration. Judah's on his way to the celebration. He's passing through the area where Tamar lives. So Tamar hears about this news, and so she decides she's going to dress in a more alluring way that made Judah think she was a prostitute. So Judah's on his way. He sees this woman near the gates to the city, and he thinks, oh, this is a concubine. This is a prostitute. It's been a while since my wife died. I could use some opportunities to meet my needs. And he goes to this woman who he thinks is a prostitute. Says, hey, how much for a one-night tryst? For just a quick one-off. And she says, I want a kid. I want basically a sheep. And he says, okay, done. And he says, but I don't have a sheep with me. And she says, okay, well then I need collateral to know that you're going to bring me that sheep. So there's this negotiation happening here, basically. So Judah says, I will give you my staff and my signet. Okay, now staffs oftentimes represented power and authority. The signet was the thing that you use, like you see in the movies in the colonial days where they get the wax and they put their ring in it to stamp it with their seal. That's what the signet was. The signet proved authority. And so he gives those to Judah gives those to her, and in lieu of the lamb that she wants, basically. So she says, "Okay, fine, I'll take those." And in Robert Alter's book, Genesis Translation and Commentary, he makes a comment in there. He says, this giving her the staff and the signet is like handing her your driver's license and credit card. She has full control over the identity of Judah, basically, which is a big deal. So he was in desperate need and really was willing to give away a lot for a one night thing, for just this one moment thing. So they go in, and due to the deed, he goes home, goes to the party, does his thing, eventually gets that lamb and says, "Okay, now I need to go pay this debt off." So he takes a servant with that lamb to go find the prostitute in this town. Servant shows up in the town, and everybody's like, "Prostitute? What are you talking about? There is no prostitute in this town." Because sometimes there's a myth in ancient worlds that there were temple prostitutes. So these were women who would stay outside of ritual religious areas that you could then sleep with, kind of a like Ashtoreth type worship or goddess worship type things as well. Most of those turned out to be rumors. Scholars have found out it wasn't really, the idea of a temple prostitute wasn't really a thing, but it was an urban legend back then. So anyways, so they're like, "There's no prostitute in our town. We don't have anything like that." And he's like, "What are you talking about?" He says, "No," but he ends up meeting Tamar and realizes, oh, Tamar's pregnant. So he goes back to Judah and says, "I couldn't find the prostitute, but I found out that Tamar, your sister-in-law, is pregnant." And Judah's like, "What? My daughter-in-law is pregnant? She hasn't been given in marriage. She is in violation of the law. We need to burn her at the stake." That is, adultery was punishable by death back then. So Judah goes to Tamar's dad's house with a group of men. Their job is to exact justice on Tamar for violating the rules, even though Judah violated the rules himself by sleeping with a prostitute. That was illegal. That shouldn't, at least according to the religious laws, he shouldn't have done that. But isn't it interesting when you think of that debate on the negotiation on price that he and Tamar had when he thought she was a prostitute? It went very quick and succinctly, and that got me wondering, is this really the first time that Judah has utilized the services of a prostitute? Probably not. He's probably on his business trips enjoying the women in the areas he's going to. This is probably not the first time because of how quick and easy that happened. And he was okay with getting it done, moving on, and not worrying about it. It wasn't like he was nervous or worried. It wasn't his first time type of a thing. So Judah's probably done that before. Well, this time it comes back to bite him because the whole purpose of Tamar pretending to be a prostitute was so that Judah could get her pregnant. This is Tamar, while she's using prostitution, which is a bad thing, she's trying to change the status quo of her life. Judah is controlling her entire life, and he's not doing her any favors. So she is going to turn it around on him, which is why when they go to burn her, she says, wait, hold on. I know how to identify who the dad is. And they're like, really? Because he should be punished too. She says, whoever staff and signet this is the father. And when Judah sees those are his, he remembers, oh, I came by here a while ago and I utilized a prostitute, and apparently that was Tamar. She disguised herself. She had a veil on her face, so he couldn't tell who she was. And so he goes, oh, crap. Those are my kids. Meaning if I punish her, I have to be executed for adultery as well. So she gets off the hook. They don't kill her. He takes her into his household, basically. Never actually gives her as a wife to his youngest, just keeps her in there as a woman he's slept with and now has kids he has to take care of. Um, but what's interesting is Judah makes the comment that she's more righteous than he is, even though she tricked him into prostitution. She didn't trick him. She made the option available, and he took full advantage of it. It's still his choice. He could have said, nope, I shouldn't deal with a prostitute and walk right on, but he didn't. So it's not as much Tamar's fault as you'd think, but Tamar changed the status quo to change her life. Now, this was a big gamble and a big challenge for her, but here's the thing to realize. Tamar's twins are the whole reason we have a tribe of Judah that lasts into Jesus Christ's day and age. Tamar's decision to trick Judah is a reason King David, King Solomon, all that lineage is there. Jesus is a descendant of Tamar and Judah. That whole tribe of Judah comes from her twins. So that's why we know so much about her story. She probably didn't realize it, but she inserted herself into the royal timeline of the kingship of Judah, basically the dominating tribe, all because she's trying to change her status quo. She took her fate into her own hands and changed it. So I think when we look at this, I think we can all agree that what Tamar did was not a good thing. But it's hard to completely condemn her considering how Judah had been treating her as well. I wouldn't say it's the best way to do it, but God made the best of what happened. And we have the tribe of Judah because of that. So really interesting how that worked out. So anyways, these stories, we don't have many more stories of the rest of the brothers, like Naphtali and Gad and these other guys. We don't have their stories. They're just names on the page. But in essence, by the time they get around to meeting Joseph and Joseph saves them physically, and from famines and stuff, Joseph's the righteous one. Joseph's the one that's been following God's commandments, and even though he's been downtrodden and put in jail several times and threatened and falsely accused and stuff, he keeps following God. And he's the one that stays with the birthright. And so that's why he has it. And so hopefully you can see some really interesting dynamics and stories here. And I hope this, again, reiterates the idea God uses imperfect people to do his work. He doesn't do his work because of these people. He does the work despite these people. And he still gets his stuff accomplished, even though a bunch of imperfect people that need to repent of their sins is how he's getting it done. So let's not think too harshly even about modern day church leaders. If they have done they've maybe not been the nicest or weren't you met him one day, oh yeah, I met him on the street and he didn't say hi to me, so he must be a jerk. Guys, they're human. They have squabbles, they have challenges. Even Boyd K. Packer used to talk about his need for repentance within a couple of years of him dying. I mean, this is the president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. He's been in this position and been a Quorum of the 12 member for decades, and he still talks about how he needs to repent. These are still imperfect people. It's what God does through them that is important for us to look at. Joseph was imperfect. Joseph Smith had lots of errors and problems, and they're very clear and apparent when you look at his life. But again, it's not Joseph's life that's amazing. It's what God did through Joseph that's amazing. So just a good lesson for us to learn, which is really interesting. Hopefully you can catch that as I've gone through this. I have one more class. In my interfaith class, the mediation course, we've been reading a book called With Good Intentions, or With Best Intentions, I think is what it's called. It's a book about failures of interfaith work, basically. It's a really interesting idea to think about. Like, instead of hearing all the stories of, oh yeah, we did this interfaith stuff and it worked out really well and brought two religions together to do good stuff, this is the book of stories of how it failed, which is good because there's a lot of lessons to be learned of how can we improve our ability to communicate with people who have different values than us. So a lot of fun in reading that book. Interesting stories that we have in there. We presented on Tuesday. We had to do a presentation. We got the class is divided up into 3 teams. My team went first. So we talked about a couple of different dilemmas. And so one of the dilemmas I want to bring up is there was a group who wanted to perform a very famous piece of work by Bach. He wrote a thing called The Passion of Christ. And it's basically music based on the story from the book of Matthew about Christ and him dying on the cross and all these things. So it's all set to music that Bach put together. The challenge with this is this music, while it's all in German, this music does not do Jews any favors. It in some ways it's almost anti-Semitic because it lays it out there clear as day. You know, the Jews are the reason Jesus died, kind of blaming the Jews for the death of Jesus, which, I mean, the Bible story follows along with. He's not necessarily making it up. But in today's world, it doesn't go over well when you have things that belittle the Jews. That's anti-Semitism in today's world. So they want to perform this piece, but they need funding. The place they went to get funding was actually a group of Jews. It was a Jewish nonprofit organization. A bunch of wealthy Jews got together, and they're asking this foundation for money. And the Jews said, okay, we like this. We think this is a great musical piece to do. Like, it'd be great to do this performance. But what are you going to do about the anti-Semitism in this work? And the people that were organizing this concert went, well, we don't know. We hadn't thought about that. So they had to think about this. Do we change classical music, Bach's composers? Do we change it to get rid of the anti-Semitism, to soften that blow? Which means we are people who are big into music and music history will decry this is a bad destruction of classical works. Or do we let it play and have the Jewish people go, this is not a good thing. This makes us look bad. Let's not play that. So they're kind of a darned if they do, darned if they don't situation. And I like this one because there's really a no-win situation as far as making sure everybody's pleased. And that sometimes happens in life, which is, I thought was an important thing for us to look at, because you have to think deeper about this. So they looked at this and realized, well, if we do this in a church venue, then keeping it preserved seems okay. If we do it in a public venue, then maybe we need to change the song. And so what they decided to do was not change the song, but before they performed it, they had a dialogue and conversation with the audience about understanding the themes and ideas in the song, because it's in German, so they're performing this in the United States. This is probably like 20, 30 years ago they were going to do this. So it's not like it was an old, you know, this isn't like, 1900s or 1800s performance. This is like 1990s, early 2000s type performance. They're in America. They're performing German classical music from Bach about the death, the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. So it's not like anybody would know what the German words meant anyways, as the people would be singing it and the orchestra is performing the music and things. But what they decided to do was talk about the themes and the ideas in it to assuage any problems with anti-Semitism, saying we're not promoting hating the Jews. We don't want you to justify hating Jews because of Bach's work. So we're going to address that. So I think they found a good amicable way to balance both sides out. Even though it might not have been 100% favorable to either side, I think it was a decent solution that they came up with. So, and it's a great example of sometimes there isn't a clear win-win situation. Sometimes both sides have to compromise and agree to disagree on some things. So some fun stuff to learn about, really interesting ideas. So hopefully you've really enjoyed this video. I know it's gone a little long. Hopefully it's worked out to be a good experience for you to learn. Keep watching. We got a couple more weeks of class left, and then I'll go into my summer stuff. I'm not doing school during the summer, but I've got a whole lot of research and a lot of reading to do, so I'll keep you up on those things as well. And I've got some other courses and things I want to talk about and share, so I might release some of that stuff as well this summer also. So we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching, and see you then.